What does it really take to dive the Britannic? It involves far more than assembling a team and booking a flight. There are permits, medicals, emergency plans, gases, equipment, ferries, and months of preparation before anyone even enters the water. Henry Castellanos, better known as Senor Scuba, organised our expedition. So I asked him exactly how he made it happen. Welcome, Henry. When did you start the work to make this happen?
Actually started pretty late, and I started out about almost a year out. Just to give you an example, right now I'm planning for our next excursion out to the Britannic. There's bookings multiple years in advance for the specific slot times, and it's not really hinges on permitting. It's more, as you know, the weather, right? We have a spring, and then there's like a considered autumn slot time. So it's around the April, May, and then there's a September, October time. And those are the two best times to go dive the Britannic and associated other wrecks like the Bordigala out in Kia, due to the currents, as you saw, and the harsh weather. Of course, temperatures, for us folks that were dove in April, May, it's pretty much the coldest it gets in Greece. And then the people in September, October, it's considered almost bathwater comparison to April, May. So, no. So it's obviously from what I gather, September, October is a more preferable time due to temperature. But I believe from what I've been gathering, the April, May is a little bit more predictable when it comes to weather, as much as predictable as you can get on the Britannic. So. But I started, like I said, about almost a year ago before our expedition. Took a little bit, for me at least, it took a little bit more work than I guess most to kind of get it going, because I wasn't very aware of how the whole Britannic expedition worked. I know that there's companies like Paragon that run private trips out to the Britannic, and then there's other folks that have done it in the past. And then with my research, I found out that Kia Divers is the only, registered dive shop now to dive the Britannic or associated wrecks around that area in the Kia historical area down in Greece. So that's kind of how I went with it. It was a little bit of a learning curve for me when it comes down to who and what. It just so happened about 2 years ago, I was in Santorini, Greece. The owner actually took me out, and we were riding out to the caves. We started talking, and he was like, "Oh, I was on the first Britannic expedition outside of Jacques Cousteau." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" So he's a very
Kevin Gur's trip, basically.
Kevin Gur's trip. So. He actually, his name is Montos. George actually knows him, is very good friends with him. He is the OG of OGs of diving the Britannic. So I spoke to him about it, and then he told me the whole thing. He spoke to me about diving open circuit, and back there in trimix was like a big voodoo gas for them, and for them that was the first trimix dive to the Britannic. And literally I think we spent floating in the water almost an hour and a half before we even started diving, because it was just so incredible, and listening to him talk about his expedition and how it went down there. And these guys are doing, 20-30 minute bottom times on open circuit trimix, and which was insane. Absolutely insane. I believe he was on the Jacques Cousteau plaque and all kinds of stuff that they actually gave for that first expedition. It was a big deal. So he showed me pictures. He had pictures obviously with Jacques Cousteau and with the whole team. It was incredible to hear from him. So knowing that, I tell you that story, knowing that, I'm like, hey, who else to speak to but him? I want to go dive the Britannic. Let's speak to him. So I called him, and then he put me in contact with Kia Divers, and that's kind of how the whole thing started. Now I'm just, hey, somebody calling, I'm looking to dive the Britannic. It was a little bit difficult, to say the least. I got a PDF is what I got. So, and from there, it was like, hey, read this, look at that. if it looks okay, give me a call back. And it kind of went, it took a little bit to get going, but once we started getting into the seriousness, and he wanted to know, like, who's your team? And I'm like, well, I really don't know right now. Let's, give me, I need to put something together. First, I wanted to see how this is even possible. Who do I need to go to? And he goes, well, it is possible. Go and get your team together, and then pretty much come back to me and let's discuss who your team members are and what their experience is, and then we can continue on that. So that's kind of how it went. And choosing and who came on board with us and who did the expedition was the first step. And obviously, how it went. I reached out to you, and Greg is a very close friend and mentor of mine. I know it was one of his bucket lists, so he was actually the first person I spoke to. Greg's the owner of Scubatron, which makes the GBM, and I'm also an instructor for them. So, I spoke to Greg, and we went through it. He said, yeah, I'm in 100%. And then I was like, okay, great. So we got 2. Now we need 1 more. And we started going through several different people. We were talking about who, where, when, and the thing is that going out, everybody wants to dive to Britannic, right? That's the whole thing. But now picking the right person to dive to Britannic is a totally different, I guess, animal, to say the least. It's not just about deep diving. It's not just about wreck diving. It's just such a, again, I know a lot more now than I did then. And just from my I guess, research that I did, it was hard to go and choose who about going. And honestly, I ended up narrowing it down to 3 people pretty much. The team came out incredible. We all jived really well together. And I think, grown a pretty good bond and friendship on this. So that was kind of how we chose the team. Now getting everybody's experience and going back to Giannis was a totally different, a totally different project on that end. So that's kind of how the whole team thing got together.
It's a really good point you make there, Henry. I think one of the things, perhaps looking from the outside in, we don't really, or I didn't realise anyway, how much pressure is on Kia divers, and Giannis in particular, from the Greek authorities. They've obviously had fatalities there, and he, I got the sense that he felt he was constantly under scrutiny, and therefore, if people were out there who weren't prepared or something happened, it would be his neck on the block. So, I mean, we obviously had to provide a whole load of stuff, and, it might just be worth talking about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so leading up to this, before we even got to sending stuff, so the sending information was after our meeting, right? But there was so much stuff prior to this, before even accepted. Most people, when they do this kind of stuff, again, this is not a cheap expedition by any means. So you would think that, once you get money for a deposit for something like this, it's like, okay, great, so let's get going. It's not about the money whatsoever with Kia. It was, he kept reiterating to me every time we did something. He goes, if things don't go right, I get arrested. And this is how it works. And George said the same thing. It's one of the comical things at this point, but at the same time, during when it was happening, it wasn't very comical, was the fact that every time Giannis spoke to me and said, hey, I need this stuff, and I would kind of, get back to him and tell him, well, do you really need this? He would tell me, look, if things aren't right, and if paperwork isn't wrong, and something happens to you when you guys are down there, I get arrested. And that's one of the things they kept saying over and over again. Same thing with George. It was like, hey, if something goes wrong and the paperwork isn't right, he goes, there isn't, a slap on the wrist. He goes, I go to jail. So things need to be correct. And I'm assuming this has gone more and more stringent on him ever since they had the fatalities on the Britannic. But, he also obviously he's got a lot of responsibility and a lot of liability behind it. I mean, we're, we both are instructors, right? And we both teach, trimix diving and so forth. I mean, the responsibility you have of a student, for example, when you're going down those kind of depths, it's like, or teaching even initial rebreather, it's like they can kill themselves and it's on your watch, right? Well, I can't imagine taking the responsibility of taking divers that you do not know to a wreck at 400 feet in harsh conditions, knowing, I guess one of the things that when I spoke to Joe DeTuri about it, because Joe did an expedition over there, he goes, it's not only about the dive. He goes, it's mentally on decompression. He goes, could you survive the decompression in this kind of weather and the temperature and the ships going by and the drone of the engines and all this stuff? He goes, it's very mental, and I didn't understand what he meant by that until one of the days that we actually had a little bit of traffic, and you hear all those boats and the big thumps and you're freezing and you're cold and you're over there, and coming up and trying to maintain PO2. It's just a lot mentally. You finish the dive. The dive was great. I mean, you go down there, it's amazing, but you get up out of the water and there's a lot. So the liability behind all that, not knowing how somebody can actually handle that, must be immense. So I did, give him a little bit of grief, I guess, at the beginning, but I honestly take it all back, because the amount of stress that man takes, until he knows who you are and what's going on, is incredible. Like you saw his demeanor change after our first dive on the Britannic, when it literally changed. We went down there and he was, completely like almost very monotone, very to business. And when we got out of the water, he was happy as all hell, high-fiving. How did it go? And of course, we're ecstatic. We're like, Jesus Christ, we just saw the Titanic practically, right? I mean, but he was happier than we were. So, yeah. And then I guess they had their debrief, and then he felt really comfortable. So now it's, it was better. And then of course the last day when we left, and he spoke when he spoke to us and said that, this is one of the first expeditions that he's had that everything just went perfectly as planned and well, and no equipment failure, nothing breaking, nobody, the things happening. I mean, I guess from one of the stories that George told us, I believe you were there when he said that they had literally the whole team had to like descend up an upline, on a DSMB and float away. I can't even imagine doing that. I really can. I mean, on a little upline on an SMB, you're decompressing. I mean, we were on a big decompression station and all kinds of stuff, and I was like, this not fun. I can't even imagine doing that on a small. Yeah, it can't. So they've had that happen. He said stories and stuff, obviously during dinner when we had dinner with the whole team, and about other things that have happened. So. Yeah, I definitely, looking back and in hindsight, I totally respect and understand his worry and about planning and everything ahead of time. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we discussed. We can go about that now, or just, I don't know if you wanted to talk.
Let's go for it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, so the biggest things, right? We needed we picked our team. After that, I started, again, this is myself, because again, he doesn't bring this kind of stuff up. We really didn't start talking about it specifics until we had our 30-day out meeting that we had together with George and everybody else in the team. By this time, I already had obviously everything planned out. I already spoke to Giannis about gases and what everybody wanted to do. And for me, my biggest thing was, and again, it's like, I needed to make sure you guys are safe, right? That was my big 100% concern. And it's not about diving. It was about what if, right? What if something goes wrong? I mean, like, just like I explained to people when I'm doing deep diving on the other, on Dive Talks, when they went over my deep planning stuff. If everything goes well, everything's great, but when stuff doesn't go well, and here I didn't have a dual rebreather, everybody was on single rebreather, us having to bail out the open circuit, and we have, obviously our gases are in different places along the shot line and different places on the decompression station, and all this kind of stuff. I was concerned, what if somebody gets bent? What if somebody gets hurt? What if one of us has a cardiac event or something's going wrong? I mean, it was so many things. And again, we're in Kia, 2 hours away from Athens by ferry. So I needed to start planning ahead of time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm spending this amount of money already. I'm like, I need a doctor with us. And that's how Dr. Borgueno, Dr. George, George Borgueno came with us, and obviously to me, he is, aside from my brother and best friend, he is literally the person that I go to for anything diving, right? I mean, he's a very accomplished, emergency medical physician and hyperbaric doctor. So I'm like, you know what? We need him to come. And I talked to Giannis, and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I bring, because again, they're very strict on this. It's 3 people on team plus 1 dive leader, and you can see why, right? There's really not much room on the boat. I'm like, I told him I want to bring a diving physician with us. I said, he's going to be there in case we need something. And at the same time, maybe we can get to dive one of the, some of the shallower wrecks like the Patras or the Bordigala. Do you mind doing that? And he goes, send me the stuff. So he goes, from the medical portion of it, he goes, yes, 100%. You can do whatever you like with that. He goes, but for diving, we'll talk about it. So I talked to George. I said, hey, do you want to come out to Greece? I need you. I said, I need somebody to take care of us in the event of something happening. And he obviously jumped at it, didn't even think twice, and he's just like that. That's the kind of person you saw how he is. I mean, he literally jumps at everything, eyes closed, whatever you need. It's like, he's the kind of person that if you need something, he will literally drop everything and come to your rescue. So of course he said, 100% count on me. I'll do whatever you like. So then we started actually talking about, what do we need? What if, our big thing, what if somebody has a decompression problem, right? Cold water, decompression starts, somebody gets bent. What do we do? Closest decompression chambers in Athens. I know other expeditions has done nothing. And then there's people's expeditions like, that had like submarines and had stuff like Richie Kohler's group that had, helicopters on standby and all kinds of things. So the helicopter thing was easy. Look, I own a very large aviation company, and I got literally assets all over the world. And if there's anybody that can find helicopters, airplanes, it's going to be me, right? That was easy. I contacted I have a contact in Greece that does a lot of us that we work together with, and we do millions of dollars of charter business with them. So I had a helicopter if we needed it, right? I pretty much said, if you need one, don't worry about it. We'll get a helicopter to you. So that was the easy part. But I'm like, okay, even helicoptering, it's still 30 minutes picking up in Kia at the dock, right? And then flying to the hospital in where they have hyperbaric stuff. So I'm like, what happens in between, right? I mean, because I'm thinking of the worst possible can happen. Somebody literally emergency, shoots out of the water out when you have 2 hours of deco left, right? Somebody's going to get very hurt. So I talked to George. I'm like, we need a decompression chamber. And he goes, you're nuts. I'm like, no, I think we need a decompression chamber. And so now we're like, we need a portable decompression chamber. And it's funny because the whole thing with the Mission Impossible and the last movie they did when they had that, and I'm like, you know what? If it's in the movie, chances are they're somewhere. So I called Joe Deturi. I'm like, no, who else is going to know more about this than Joe Deturi? So I called Joe Deturi, and because he obviously does major decompression chambers for hospitals and private individuals and so. And he goes, yeah, we can get you a decompression chamber. He goes, well, how much you want to spend? I said, well, how much do I need? So how much are they? He goes, well, decompression chambers start anywhere between 10,000 to a couple of million. And I'm like, I need a portable one. He goes, okay, well, that narrows it down. He goes, well, then he got into the details of it. And anyway, the one that would do something, because there were therapeutic chambers that would make us a little bit better than nothing at all happening. But he said you really need at least a 3 ATA chamber, which is pretty much what you use at the hospitals. That's portable. So there was only one chamber available that was known to do this, and I believe it was the company's called Code One. Their chamber is $95,000, and I contacted them, and I honestly, I'm like, you know what? I asked Joe. I said, is it worth to have one of these things? Oh, he said you can rent it. I'm like, all right, well then I guess I'll just look about buying one. So I went and I contacted the people, and they're like, all right, yeah, we can sell you one. That's not a problem. So I was fairly well into. I sent them deposit on it and the whole deal, and I got George scheduled for training and everything on the decompression chamber, and it's an incredible chamber. It literally fits one person. It works off of 2 scuba tanks, one O2 tank and then one regular aluminum 80 to pressurize the chamber, and it's got hard points for helicopters. So you can literally load it onto a helicopter and you can literally fly in the chamber to where you need to go. So it was actually really cool. They're usually at a lot of the different shows, but it was incredible. So I saw the chamber, went out, visited the company out in Canada. Very, very good. And then when I was out there speaking to him, like, he says, I mean, what are you going to do with it? I'm like, well, I need it for the Britannic. And they're like, well, that's great. He goes, but what are you going to do with it afterwards? I mean, this is a fairly expensive chamber. I'm like, I don't know, rent it, sell it. I have no idea. Maybe use it on other stuff. And he goes, well, we can rent one to you, and I'm like, oh, well, okay. I said, well, what's that process about going, and so he goes, look, you already put a big deposit down. He says, let's see what we can do. Normally we don't rent to individuals. We rent to to big teams, like, stuff like things that Richard Harris does, like going into the Pierce Resurgence or something that's in the middle of nowhere. So stuff like that. And he goes, let me think about it. He goes, you have your doctor scheduled to go do training. And so we went through that. Eventually, the logistics behind having a chamber in Kia, after talking to Giannis and everything else, was actually a little bit more. It wasn't going to work as well, because in my head, just like everybody else, I thought the boats were going to be a lot bigger, right? I thought it was going to be, hey, I can put the decompression chamber on the boat and we can get out of the water into the chamber and everything's great. And obviously, as you saw, we were diving off ribs, right? So that changed things quite a bit, because now what was going to help in the chamber, as soon as you get out of the water, get in the chamber, ain't going to happen, right? The chamber is probably the size of the rib, so that wasn't going to work. So we went with the helicopter option. I had helicopters, as you probably didn't even notice in the background. Anytime we went diving, I had a helicopter on standby in case we needed it. And again, it's stuff. And so we had helicopters on standby in case we needed it. Of course, Giannis also had the speedboats. You saw during his briefing, he said he could have gone there. So there was stuff that was already in play when we were there. Luckily, we didn't need anything. Everything went out perfect. But that was the first thing in my head I needed to get squared away. What happens in case of an emergency? So once we got that planned out with George, I started thinking about, what do we do for gases and so forth. And again, I didn't talk to you or talk to Greg because obviously it was a lot further out. But I mean, again, we all dive pretty. You saw we all dive pretty much the same, right? Anybody that's diving to that kind of depths, we're all looking at the stuff we need to do, right? The gases are going to be approximately the same, and if somebody's drastically different, you kind of ask, why? You would, if I was diving something totally like, out of oddball, you would have been like, why are you doing that? So, but we were all on the same page. So I talked to Giannis. He wanted to know what gases we needed and what we were planning. He never, and I guess it was a little different than I don't know if he did it just to test or I don't know. He's like, what do you want to dive? And I'm like, so again, I started planning on my gases. How I do dive planning first of all, I need to find, I go by, I don't use tables, obviously do everything longhand. I'm a big advocate about that. That's what I teach. Everything's longhand. I want to the decimal point kind of deal. So I wanted to do math. So of course I go and find out oxygen first, and I find helium, and then after I do that, I'll for the depth that I'm going to, then I end up going and looking at gas density, and then isobaric kind of diffusion issues and all that stuff. And I came up with my bottom gas, intermediate gas, and then the 2 decompression gases that we were using. I sent that to Giannis, and then Giannis goes, okay, great. That sounds like a great idea. We'll talk in 6 months. And I'm like, 6 months? Why? So then why did you have me do all this now? So it's funny. It's like almost like you feel like he wants to know that you know what you're planning kind of deal. And then, so we did all that. It stayed pretty quiet for about 6 months. Things started getting very busy about 3 months out. That's when things started getting really busy again between Kia Divers and myself. And of course, you guys at that point, we started really talking about a lot of things together. What kind of tanks do you want for your setup? What kind of tanks Greg wants? What are you going to be needing for dry suits and DPVs and all this stuff that we were planning? I started going and all kinds of stuff in my head. I'm like, am I going to dive dual CCR? Am I dive single CCR? Which rebreather to take? I had in my head, I had. I was going to be diving, my Symbios and of course, a month before then, or two, yeah, actually a month before then, I had, a little bit of an incident with the Symbia. So that changed everything, and so there was a lot of things happening during that time that we did for the planning stuff. When it came down to tanks and gases, I needed to find DPVs and what's going to work. Of course, you started, obviously doing the same thing about your dry suits. I didn't even think about dry suits until you brought it up. And when we were talking, I'm like, I got 2 dry suits. That's it. And then I'm like, I'm thinking, thermal wise, that I'm going to be okay because I've dove in 40-degree water, but diving in 40-degree water for an hour and a half is way different than doing it for 3 hours. And again, that didn't click in my head, right? I mean, again, I'm not a cold water diver. I dive cold water. I've dove cold water. I dove in 28-degree water, my -2-degree water for, your Celsius scale, right? I dove in Iceland. I did a 2-hour dive in very, very cold water. I'm like, I did great there, so it should be okay. I wasn't. I was colder in Kia than I was in Iceland, and it's because of the extended bottom times and running high PO2s for extended period of time. So, am I going to be more prepared next year? 100%. I mean, as you know now, I'm going to Malta in about 3 weeks, and the water there is colder than Kia was. So I'll test some of the stuff that I'm doing now over there. So it'll be good. But there's a lot of pre-planning until we got the 3 months out. Another thing for myself was travel, right? As you saw the way it worked out, we needed to make sure that all 4 of us met in around the same time to get to Kia, right? So George lives in Lakeland, which is in Central Florida. Greg and myself live in South Florida. You live in the UK. None of us, except for George and myself, flew on the same airline. Greg flew on United. I flew on Turkish, and you flew on what was it? I think it was EasyJet. We're flying 14, 15 plus hours to coordinate to get. In my head, it looked like a lot of ferry times, but again, that was another thing that I looked at. I looked at ferry times during the summer. There's 25,000 ferries a day, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy. Not with us, right? All of a sudden, I look at the times when we're going to go, and when they publish them, I'm like, there's 2 ferries. I'm like, oh, okay. There's 3 ferries going out and only 1 ferry coming back. I'm like, didn't even think about this kind of stuff,
Once I got it's a really good point, isn't it? Because I mean, people often forget this isn't just about the diving, is it? It's and I mean, the other aspect, of course, is we all flew there, we all took our gear. Loads of other expeds that I know of, they find a couple of people, they rent a van, or somebody's got a van, and they chuck all their gear in the van and they drive it to Greece. Clearly, that's not an option from America, and so we had to sort out all that logistics as well, didn't we?
It was. I mean, we needed to figure out how to get there. So the first thing I did is and kind of the way it worked out, and I think the way I did it, I'm like, hey, let me find a flight. Again, I do this for a living, right? So let me find the earliest flight I can get there, and then we will reverse build kind of everybody's schedule around that. So I got my flight, and then I told, okay, Greg, I arrive at this time. You want to fly United because of whatever reason, then arrive here. And then, of course, I told you, and we all arrived around within an hour or 2 hours of each other. And again, I'm not thinking of stuff. Okay, now I'm like, I knew I had to take a ferry, but I'm like, okay, I'm gonna grab an Uber from the airport and go to the ferry. And then when I get over there, I didn't think about Kia the way it is. Again, I didn't think, we made a joke about it, but there's only one road, right? Kia is small. It is walkable, but it's also 1,000 feet high. So luckily when I found this out, I'm like, we need a rental car. So, and I got a rental car. Greg was like, why do you need a rental car? We can walk. And I'm like, he says it's only a half a mile, or not even the house is only a quarter. I'm like, yeah, and again, Google Maps doesn't show you at 3 dimensions that the house is only a quarter mile away, but it's 1,000 feet up in the air. And if you saw some people that might have saw some pictures on our social media, literally we were 1,000 feet up in the air, and so forth. So we got to walk down 1,000 feet and then to walk a quarter mile. So it was comical, right? When we got there, to actually go through this. But these are things that I didn't think about, right? Okay, we got to the ferry. Now we got to Kia, and it was so much logistics behind the whole thing. I mean, at this point, I'm like, well, now we got to find a place to stay. There's 4 of us, right? And I'm like, okay, great. All the hotels that the people normally stay at on the September-October expedition are closed. Why? Because it's winter. So there was one hotel available, one hotel only. And that hotel was like $900 a night because it was that really expensive hotel that we spoke about. So I'm like, okay, that's not going to work at all, right? $900 a night, and it was literally on the other side of Kia. It was. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work out. So I called Giannis, and Giannis goes, yeah, I have a friend of mine, Maria, right? The famous Maria. He goes,
we all love Maria.
Yeah. I didn't know Maria was I guess Giannis's friend. So he goes, call your friend Maria. So it was funny the way it happened. So I call Maria. Maria tells me, I really don't have any places available for that size. It's off season. And he goes, I might have a couple, but I don't know yet. And I'm like, okay, that was a waste. So I'm like, go Airbnb. I go to Airbnb, and initially I find one place that was really nice. And I contacted on Airbnb. I booked it, paid for it, and then everything was awesome. 2.5 months or 3 months goes by, and I get an email that said, here's your refund. I'm very sorry. The whole house flooded. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? What do you mean the house flooded? And they wrote back to me, the house flooded. We have to do major renovations. So here's your refund. And I'm like, I got nowhere to stay, and this is like 5 months or 5 months out, and or 6 months out, I think it was now, or maybe 5 months. Actually, it was about 5 months. So I go back to Airbnb, and now the places that were available that had enough rooms for 4 people, right? Individual rooms, because we're all adults. We're not going to bunk bed with each other, right? I mean, if we had to, we had to. But I was trying to find a house with 4 bedrooms. There weren't any that had space for the whole time we were there. So finally, I found one house, and guess who the person was that manages everything on Airbnb? It was Maria. I had no idea. She was running this behind the scenes. So I rent the house that we were at. We did everything else, and I'm only talking to her by email. So we got the house, and everything is great. It's obviously a beautiful home where we stayed at, and it was awesome. But she goes, and she's the one who goes. She goes, did you get a rental car? And I'm like, no, I didn't get it. She goes, you're gonna need one. And again, I didn't understand why. Obviously now I understand why. So I'm like, okay, let me find a rental car place in Kia. There's one rental car place in Kia next to the pharmacy that we saw. They only had 2 cars. Guess what size cars they were? They were like this big, right? They were like the smart cars. And I'm like, we're not going to fit in there. That's not going to work. So again, finding a rental car place in Athens that allows you to take the car out of technically to an island was a nightmare. That was a problem that I did not think that was going to be a problem. Luckily, I have a corporate account with National, and they at the tier they don't let people take cars out of the mainland, but because of the corporate account that I have with them and the amount of money we spend yearly with them, they made an exception as long as I carry a higher liability insurance. So they let us out. I took the car, and I thought it was a big enough car, and it wasn't until we got to the airport, and now and this is before you even arrived. Okay, this is when me, George, and Greg got to the airport, and now we have literally like 7 large suitcases, and I'm like, how in the world am I going to fit all this in a car? And the lady goes, you're not. And she goes, you're not. And she starts laughing at me, and I'm like, I don't find this funny. I mean, what do you want me to do? She goes, I don't have anything bigger. So and then the manager comes over us after he sees our tier status, and he goes, I can give you, he says, would a minivan work? And I'm like, you got one here? He goes, our commercial side does. We'll give you a minivan. And I'm like, you're a lifesaver. Thank you. So he gave us the car that we had for the time we were there. And
so I missed all of this. Right? I missed all of this, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You missed it. I was in a very bad mood. Let's put it this way, because and it's funny. Greg was laughing in the background because he's over there. He's just cracking up. George is laughing. They're standing behind me, and I'm like, this isn't funny. I'm like, how the hell are we going to get to Kia and fit all this stuff in here? I'm like, I don't think we can even fit 4 people in here without luggage, let alone with luggage, you know? So that was a bit of a pain. And yeah, you missed that. We spent an hour and a half at the airport, almost 2 hours at the airport, trying to get a rental that's going to fit all our stuff. So that was, again, this is logistics that, again, I did not think about, did not know about. I'm sure if you book, this kind of expedition with one of the big companies, they probably handle all of that for you. But, with me, it didn't work out that way. So, again, a lot of planning. It happened. And of course, then was that was your arrival, which turned out great. And I'll let you tell that story because it was actually really funny.
Man, well, you saved me, didn't you? So it was always going to be tight for me because my flight landed a bit after yours, didn't it? And the ferry was, I think there was about 2 hours between me landing and getting on the ferry. The ferry was probably half an hour, 45 minutes drive away from the airport. So I rushed through, got all my stuff, and I had 3 massive bags and a smaller carry-on and a rucksack and stuff. So I had 5 bags. Got outside, got an Uber, jumped in the Uber and motored to the port. And all the way through, we were texting each other. And you were going, when are you getting here? Oh, yeah. And I'm like, maybe now. Anyway, so I eventually turned up, and I didn't have a ticket either, did I? Because I hadn't bought a ticket. So they dropped me at the ferry at the ticket office. And I had maybe 15 minutes before the ferry was to go. And it was like 200 meters away from the from the ferry, wasn't it? And I'm like, okay, am I going to be able to run all over there with half my gear, run back, get the rest of my gear, run back over there with the other half of the gear and get on the ferry? And then like a knight in shining armor, the minivan turned up with you in it just in the nick of time. And it was, I'll tell you what, you cannot believe how pleased I was to see you. And obviously we've never met at this time, have we?
No, this was the first time. It was funny. And the thing is that what happened is because the car was so large, I was the last one to come on. And the Port Authority cops were there, as you saw, that they're the ones loading the ferry and watching. And I went up to the cop and I'm like, I have one more person coming. He goes, you can't leave. I'm like, I have to. I have to leave. You cannot tell me I can't. He looked at me with a smirk. He goes, so I'm like, see you later. So I ran to get to you, and we obviously loaded everything on, and we got on the ferry to get over there to start our our journey over to Kia. But yeah, that was really interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, the kind of stuff you don't even think about. But you know what? Yeah. We'll be a lot better organized next time, I'd have thought.
I think it'll be great.
So Henry, I just want to go back to one of the things that you talked about earlier on, which is that when you during the diving, there's this kind of sense that Kia divers, Giannis and George, were very concerned, they were concerned about us as individuals. They've never met us before. They're going to be taking us on this, pretty extreme dive. And I think we probably both felt that there was a sense of us being checked, wasn't there, on the first few dives?
100%. Yeah, we were definitely checked. I mean, but the checking started beforehand. I know Greg and George are not, they're not as public as we are, right? I mean, we both are YouTubers, and the dive community, obviously knows you 100%, myself and my channel's coming up, and a lot of people know me, and so forth. But so, and again, just read the month before then. I mean, I was doing dives 160 meters, and stuff like this. So obviously I'm competent to do the, deep dive. They didn't care. they can care less. They're like, oh, that's awesome. Great. I need this, and it was like jumping through hoops, to get all the stuff. We needed to get certifications to them with like specific unit specific and trimix specific. They needed a specific unit with hypoxic trimix attached to that unit. They wanted a instructor and an agency. For myself, for you, for Greg, and for George. Everybody needed it, right? I mean, you had to go and speak to your agency. I'm an instructor on the GBM. I had to actually get Greg to get me a unit specific hypoxic certificate. So I actually had to go, do that and do a dive with him, kind of like to officially do this through, so forth. My highest level of certification is I'm CCR Expedition Trimix, which is under INTD. It's to 120 meters, but it's not unit specific because of the depth, right? But they didn't accept that. They wanted had to be unit specific. It had to have trimix on it. It had to have an instructor on it. Greg, the Greg was the funniest thing. So Greg is the inventor and he is the manufacturer for GBM. So he doesn't really have a GBM, 100-meter certification. But he has he's an instructor trainer on the GBM to hypoxic trimix. So he sent me that, and when I sent that to Giannis, he goes, "Well, I don't think that's enough." And I'm like, "Well, he can teach it." So he goes, "We'll find out." So, and again, it was not him at all. I think it was the Greek authorities, whoever the Coast Guard, whoever the one who blessing all this stuff up. And again, he kept bringing it up. I can get in a lot of trouble. I can go to jail if this isn't right. And we went through about a week and a half of back and forth on this, and it almost felt like he was, I wouldn't say being very friendly anymore. It wasn't friendly as he was with us when we were there, because obviously we had to pull in teeth. He goes, "Well, we couldn't just give him everything he wanted," and it's because obviously you've been diving for extremely long periods of time, especially on the AP, and the units I'm on and what I was diving, we had to go jump through hoops. The one that George had his unit, and since he just got certified on to full trimix on it, I think maybe 6 months ago or something like this, he had an actual certificate that said, chest mounted Optima, trimix. He goes, why don't you give us one of those? George has it perfect. I'm like, we're trying. It's just a little bit more difficult than this. We have it. It's just give us some time. So we had to do that. We had to do DAN insurance. All that stuff, and then medical. So you saw the medical thing. We give them a medical certificate, and it wasn't, oh, that's not enough. You need, we would prefer you go to a cardiologist, and we, prefer to get a signed off for medical person. So there was a lot, right? I mean, as you saw, I get medicals every 6 months because I'm a commercial pilot. So luckily, I didn't have to go to. I have an EKG done every 6 months. So I went and handed that, and then George did my physical, and he did all the paperwork. And Greg, I had a fight with Greg for a little while. He goes, the INTD and TDI accept this. He says, why don't they? I'm like, I don't know. I can't answer this question. I was like, please just have a doctor fill this out for you. So you saw what it took to get there, and the planning. And then, of course, the dives. I mean, our first checkout dive, I don't know if you felt the same way, but it felt like everything from gear assembly to what gases are you taking and why are you doing this, and everything was being looked at. Like, is your trim okay? Is your could you DPV? Could you do this and do that? I mean, I think they felt better after our first dive on the Patras, but I think Bordigala made them feel a little bit better. But again, I didn't see the sigh of relief out of Giannis until we came out from the first Britannic dive. After the first Britannic dive, his demeanor changed 100%. It was like, okay, you guys earned your space in the table now. Okay, we can talk. And that's how I felt. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'll be honest as well. I quite respect them for that as well, because
100%. Yeah.
For having that approach, I think is is a really good thing, and probably there's other parts of the industry that could really to have a good long hard look at that and say, what, this is kind of what best practice looks like.
Oh yeah. I think so their level of safety. I mean, I know what what's it called? One of the things that even Greg was talking. I was like, the boats or ribs are small and so forth. Again, they're limited on the island on what they can have there, right? Even parking. I don't think if they had a big dive boat, I don't know if they have somewhere to park it. That's something that so I think what they have is ideal and perfect for them. But taking all that aside, their preparation for our dives was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. They thought about everything. I mean, they went and practiced putting deco station down, practice emergencies, putting, bailout, dropping all the bailout tanks in case of an emergency. It was very impressive. I mean, to hear what they were going to do and what they did before our first real dive, which was the Bordigala. They went out on the day before in those rough seas, and they were running drills with the team, and I was extremely impressed with that. I mean, I really wish that other people in the industry did this. I mean, especially in very busy areas, like, for example, in Egypt, that this past year has been having, there's been notorious for having a lot of deaths and liveaboards blowing up and all kinds of things happening, and then other places like Hawaii and stuff like this that are very nonchalant and relaxed about things. They can learn a thing or two from Kia. I mean, they honestly have their stuff together, from the emergency stuff. And even look, I'm a blender. I blend on my own gas. I'm very proud of it. This is one of the things I do for fun. It's funny what people do for fun. I love blending. It's one of the things I spend hours do and even their mixes are just spot on. When we asked, hey, I need 970. It's 970. It was on the money. I mean, and so that just shows me that they take their time, and the people that they have blending, and the people that they train, like Diego, for example, they train them well, and they tell them exactly what needs to be done. I'm like I said, I'm a trimix blender, and we were talking to George, and one day I came in, and I think I had let me see. I think I had my after the first Britannic dive. I think I had 1070 or something to that sort. And then I'm like, hey, I want to bring it down to like I had like an 1170 or something, because we weren't going to be going that deep the first one. I'm like, I want to go a little bit. I want to bring it down to like a 972, 975. And he literally, and again, I knew what I wanted. I knew I needed to put X amount of air and so forth, just because I blend that mix very often, and he knew it off of his head as well. He was like, hey, he goes, top it off with 32% and add a little bit and I'm like, I was impressed, because again, not many people know how to, blend trimix like that and know exactly what you need. So again, every detail to that was very impressed. I was very, very impressed with their whole operation, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Me too. For a small center, they really punch above their weight, don't they, in terms of delivering this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about kit then, because clearly, I was amazed that you, I think, only flew out with 2 hold bags. I came out with 3, and I think you had 2 rebreathers and 2 dry suits, I think, with you. So, yeah. Let's talk about that, because people have asked me about this. How do you get cylinders there? What cylinders do you use? All that kind of stuff. So let's hear it.
Initially, I wanted to dive dual CCR. Right. That's to me. That's my norm. When I dive, over actually 80 meters. Anytime I'm over 80 meters, I dive dual CCR, just because I don't like carrying all the extra bailout, right? Again, the way you guys dive in the UK, which is awesome, the team bailout strategies and so forth are great. But the way I dive here in Florida, and also, diving other places that I don't know, for example, when I go to Egypt or I go to Malta or I go, again, we're not doing team bailout, right? We kind of carry what we fend for ourselves. So, on a 100-meter dive, we're carrying minimum 4 cylinders, right? If you're doing 15, 20-minute bottom time, you do more. Now we got to start adding more. So I want to do a CCR. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that. I think for next time, I'm sure that they'll have no problem me doing dual CCR. I think the dual CCR thing was more of like, I really don't know if you can dive it on 1 CCR. Forget about 2, right? So, which was like safety thing. So I had to choose, number one, which CCR to bring with me, which, again, I did a whole YouTube video on that, right? But cylinders, you dive back mount. Me and Greg dive and George dive chest mount. So, and we dive different configurations. Greg dives side mount. I dive back mount doubles. so does George. So I needed to find out what Kia has first, and then from there we end up, doing working backwards. So Kia had doubles, Kia had aluminum 80s, so that was great. From there, now we had to find out staging, stage rigging, and then O2 cylinders and so forth. That was another thing that we needed. Right? We on a chest mount rebreather, we have small. We don't carry 3-liter, the standard 3-liter oxygen cylinders that everybody else carries. We carry at the most 2-liter. So that was a little bit of a change. I carry my own oxygen cylinders. I use carbon fiber O2 tanks on my rebreather. So did George, and Greg decided not to bring one, but luckily George, the other George, our guide George, had a 2-liter steel tank that Greg used. So that was good. How was I so compact? I can answer that. Practice, right? The reason I say practice is because it wasn't like that. I can tell you a year ago when I started diving to 100 meters, diving to 100 meters, I was not as compact as I am now. I literally, so this Britannic expedition was the fourth of my the fourth expedition that I was doing starting in December. I actually made the fifth. So I've been diving every month starting December, January, February, March, and then April. Every month I was diving those type of depths or more, traveling all over the world. I was in Honduras, I was in Egypt, I was in Malta. I went to several other spots during that time, and I was diving every single month doing that. So I kind of had my kit already set up, 2 bags and my book bag, and I can fit everything I need in there. So it was fairly simple. And I always travel with, so if one rebreather breaks, I have a second one. I always travel with 2 rebreathers. I pretty much own 2 of every rebreather that I dive. And not so, and it's not because of do I need to? No, number one, most of the rebreathers that I dive, the chest mounts I teach, so I have to have 2 anyway to teach. But the ones I don't teach on, I carry 2 because if I'm going somewhere and one breaks, I have another one. And as you saw, and it was funny, some of your friends said, "How did all of a sudden, you come out with 4 GBMs?" It's because Greg had 2 and I had 2, so now we had 4 GBM rebreathers, right? And they were full functioning units with computers, solenoid, sensors and scrubber. I mean, it wasn't partial; it was 4 100%, complete units with computers and everything. And that's what I carry. I had 2 dry suits with me in case one catastrophically broke, right? I mean, the amount of money that we spent on the Britannic expedition, I'm like, I'm not going to not dive because of a dry suit. I'm not going to not dive because of a rebreather. I carried spares of everything. I had spare seals. I had literally about 8 sensors on my own. Greg had another 7 sensors that he brought with him. I had spare computers. I had, aside from the 2 computers that I had for each, four technically 2 computers for each rebreather, I brought a backup set of Halcyon computers and then a backup set of petrol computers in case they went bad. So I had pretty much 2 of everything on board. And again, it was all packed very neatly inside of 2 bags. So that's kind of what I carried. George, on top of he only had 1 rebreather, but on top of all the stuff, he brought enough medical stuff with us to pretty much, I would say, intubate somebody on the boat. I mean, he had laryngoscopes. He had full, what's it called, anesthesia kits and stuff to pretty much, if he had to literally intubate somebody. So, all the stuff that they use to medically wise to do that, had a defibrillator on with us. We had, he had a full medical kit, like all kinds of different drugs on him in case we needed epinephrine and I mean, literally a gamut of worth of stuff, because obviously he's a doctor, so he's able to carry all that stuff. So he had all that on top of all the dive gear, and he carried it with him every single time we dove. I don't know if you noticed that, but he had a little duffel bag that he had in the event of anything happened. He was ready to pretty much stick a tube down our throat and and so forth. So it was like I said, I don't think we were over prepared. I'm not going to say over prepared because in the event of a problem, I think we had enough gear to handle whatever problem we needed medically and diving. So I think we had everything we needed. Am I going to bring less stuff next year? No, probably not. I'll probably bring exactly what I had and maybe tweak some things that, I would have probably bring more video lights and stuff that I didn't bring because I wasn't planning to penetrate, but to make the proper videos as you had a proper set of video lights. I'll probably bring stuff like that with me next year, to mount on my scooter and so forth. But I think we had everything that we needed on my end. I mean, you had obviously a lot of stuff as well. I mean, you had spare heads and stuff for your rebreathers and things that that you had. So I mean, you probably tell everybody about that. But I think from our end, from the state side, I think each one of us had double of everything.
Yeah. It was incredible what was out there, and I'm exceedingly grateful that you did, because obviously I got the opportunity on one of our days when we were blown out to do that GBM conversion course, which was absolutely fantastic. I'm so grateful to Greg and yourself, in particular yourself, obviously for giving me the opportunity to do that. Absolutely fascinating, and I've been banging on about it over here. People are absolutely sick to death of it, but it was that good. I'll tell you, one of the other things we should probably talk about a bit, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, Henry, is kind of our approach to bailout. And and the role of safety divers and who carried what cylinders and all that kind of stuff. Because I think that is something that people are going to be interested in.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about that, obviously we were all on different configuration. You had back mount rebreather. Greg was side mount, chest mount. I was doubles and chest mount. And on Britannic, we obviously need a minimum of 4 gases, right? And to be able to do a dive. We need a deep gas. We need some type of travel gas. We needed a 50% bottle and then 100%. We did, obviously, we discussed this and we did team bailout. And then George, not only did we do team bailout, but George had a full set of tanks himself. So he had full 4 tanks with him, and he was leashing his deco cylinders, and he had bottom end and his deep gas. So we had literally 2 sets of full gases for everybody in the event something happened. On top of that, we had all the gas on the decompression station. So before we get to that, you were carrying, I believe, a deep gas and a travel gas, plus your diluent on your back and your O2. Greg was carrying a deep gas and a travel gas himself. I was carrying a lot of travel gas. I mean, normally I would have split my doubles and I would have carried pretty much what you guys did, just an 80 of bottom and 80 of gas, and that's it. But I wanted to, in the event of something happens, again, have enough gas for you guys as a travel, right? Because deep gas, we're not going to use a lot if we bail out. As soon as we get above into the 60-meter range, we're going to need some kind of travel gas to keep us, or at least to keep us alive until we can get to a decompression gas in the event we drifted away. So I wanted to make sure that I had enough travel gas for everybody in the event anything happened. So I elected to take both my doubles filled with travel gas. So I had a little over 160 cubic feet of travel gas with me on a long hose, on a 6 foot or 7 foot hose, and another 4 foot hose on my other tank. So I could literally feed 2 people at the same time in event something happened on that. So, and then of course a deep gas. And then on the decompression station, they normally had a 150%, 50-10, and then a 100% on the higher up at the 6 meter mark. We elected to do more than that. I guess as a team, we had 2 50% bottles, and then we had 2 oxygen bottles, and then we had extra bottles on the boat as well. And again, we all brought enough. I brought enough rigs for that as well, and so forth. So that was something that was. I think we were very well prepared in the event of something happening. Right. It was really important for us to have enough gas to deco. Right. I mean, we were running about 30-minute bottom times, and 30-minute bottom times, adds up 2.5, 3 hours of decompression. And on a rebreather, we bail out, that's going to increase it probably to 3.5, maybe even 4 hours, depending upon where on the wreck we were. I mean, especially the day we did the full traverse from tip to stern through the promenade, that probably was by far one of I think for us the most. I don't want to say dangerous. I want to say the most exposed we would have been in the event something happened, right? Yeah, because if we ended up bailing out, we would have had to be open circuit all the way, traversing a 1,000-foot boat on open circuit to get to the line before we even go up. So that was to me. I wouldn't say it was like I said, it wasn't dangerous. It was the day that I was very aware of what was happening, and wanted to make sure we all stood together and stuck together. And as you saw, we were on a line. I know somebody made a comment on that part of my video, like, "Oh, he goes, are we going to see anything but Dominic's blue, yellow box?" And I'm like, not if I can help it. We were a single file line following each other like we were a train through the promenade. And if one stopped, we all stopped. And if somebody kept on going, we all kept on going. And on one of my pictures that I posted online, I took a selfie, and you can see me, and then Greg was right behind me. It was clockwork. I have to admit, when everybody on the team was put together, and when we dove, it was amazing. I think we did an amazing job for people that never dived together. We picked it up very quickly, and we worked together, and we knew what each one of us was doing, even though we were all doing different things. You were videoing here, I was videoing there. Greg was following us and behind us. When we needed to be together, we were together. No, not once did George, our guide, look back and says, "Hey, get back." No, we were there, which was one of the things that he actually spoke to me about and spoke to you about. He goes, "You guys really, worked really well together as a team," and I think it worked. It worked out that way because of the experience level that everybody has. We kind of knew what we expected from each other, and we didn't have to talk about it.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think, I think because we all knew that the strategy involved us all being together, and that was part of the deal, we knew that if somebody had an issue, to get them to the surface, we all had to work together. And I think that was probably on all of our minds. It was certainly on my, certainly on my mind, and because I think the kind of strategy that we adopted of carrying a limited number of cylinders is something that people kind of, raise an eyebrow about, isn't it?
They do. Yeah. People, I'm not to interrupt. They do, especially here. And I say here in South Florida. Here, they're very against team bailout, because everybody here carries their own cylinders, carries everything else. And honestly, your exposure level increases doing that. Could I, like when I was diving with Issa, and it was funny, because after my dual rebreather incident, I didn't have another rebreather to dive the rest of the time I was there, but I still had 5 days worth of very deep diving to do. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Let me learn the GUE way of leashing everything. And Issa, he gave me my run for my money. I don't know, a couple of videos or pictures you saw. He had me carrying 7 cylinders, and it takes a lot to do that. But I also realized that I don't want to do that. In the event of me really needing to use all those 7 cylinders, I can't even imagine the workload that has to go with that. And that's what the problem is, that, people don't realize this, and everybody talks about, carry your own gas, do your own thing, but they don't think about what if, if everything works out great, yeah, I'll carry 4 cylinders all day, 5 cylinders all day. But what if I have to really bail out and use them? Now things change, right? And now let's add something more to the mix. Let's add 400 foot of water in the Britannic with a DPV, because I need a DPV, not because, it's for fun. I need it because of the current, right? And now, it's cold, and now I'm bailing out, And now my stress level literally just went through the roof. Why? Because my TTS is clicking off like crazy right now. I have to now get back to the shot line, because if I launch an SMB, it's considered an emergent, like a maritime emergency in Kia, as we were briefed, right? We were in a shipping channel with tons of very active traffic. So drift deco is not an option. They have to call the Coast Guard and shut the channel down if that happens. So the stress level was incredible. So I think the way we did it about carrying the gas we need and working as a team, hey, you carry the travel gas, you carry the 50%, and our job is stick together. If one person has an emergency, we all have an emergency. And I think that's the way it works out. I mean, one person has a problem, we all do. And that's kind of what we adopted. And when we're doing this kind of dive, honestly, I think it's the only safest way to do it.
No, I obviously it's far more similar to what I'm used to doing. So obviously I'm going to be in favour of it. And I was really pleased to kind of see how seriously Giannis and the Kia Divers team took, their part in it with, practicing and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. I thought it worked really well for us. Obviously, other people may have different views, but hey, Sodom, that's what we did, and it worked for us.
It's what it is,
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, Henry, I think we're going to wrap this up now, but I guess it'd be useful just to kind of a few things to kind of finish up with, to summarize. So if somebody out there is thinking they want to do the Britannic, if you were to give them, I don't know, 3 top tips, what would your 3 top tips be?
Number one, I would research the actual wreck and where you're going, right? So they could always reach out to us and talk to people, like Richard Kohler or people from Paragon, or people from actually calling Kia directly. But you really need to know where you're going and know what you're doing, right? That's number one. Number two, you want to do the Britannic, you need to make sure that your experience level is where it is. And it's not, oh yeah, people get hypoxic trained and they never dive hypoxic. They never dive 100 meters. Again, they do it once during training. They bail out once and that's it. This is not a dive like that. You need to be competent at diving 100 meters. And then some. You have to be very up to your emergency procedures and know what your bailout strategies are, and know the dive honestly should not. And I'll say this from an aviation point of view again, like, because you're a helicopter pilot. Flying or diving is not, that should be second nature. That is not your primary means of worry at this point. You have so many other things to be worrying about down there on the Britannic, other than, is my PO2 okay on my rebreather? That should be second nature to you. Diving at 100 meters should be second nature to you. This is not a entry level dive by any means. There's so many other challenges to diving the Britannic. The stuff, the rebreather diving and the bailing out and the being at 100 meters or 330 feet or even deeper should be something that you're accustomed to doing. Also, competent on your dry suit. How many people are dry suit qualified and they have no idea how to do dry suit emergencies, or manage a dry suit correctly? The people who dive in hot and cold water, yeah, that's all they live by. But I can tell you here in Florida, not many people dive dry suits here. And if the people that are diving dry suits, I can tell you they're not doing it year round. I specifically, and this is myself, and I'll tell you personally, I'm not a dry suit diver. I really haven't. But for the last 8 months, I lived in my dry suit. I will tell you 100%. I dove my dry suit everywhere. I could have been hot as hell. It was 35 degrees outside or 100 degrees outside, and I had my dry suit on and I had whatever I needed to do. I literally lived in it for about 8 months, because I can tell you the dry suit diving is not my thing. To me, I'm in a wetsuit. Even in the caves, I'll be in a 4 or 5, 3 or 5 mil wetsuit, and that's it. I don't dive dry. I changed that for myself. And speaking personally, and I went to cold weather places. The was it 2 weeks before? People thought you're nuts. I went to San Diego. I literally flew to San Diego with the exact gear that I was going to be diving on the Britannic. And San Diego, cold water. It was it was 12 degree, 13 degree water, and I did 120-meter dive in that water down, and people thought I was nuts. And like, what are you doing going down 120 meters in that kind of like horrible water, Pacific water? And I'm like, practicing. That's what I'm doing. Because if I have problems here, I'm going to have problems in the Britannic, and I need to make sure my gear works, So that's what I did, So that's one of the things. Make sure you're prepared. And the last thing that I probably say is go to Kia divers. Speak to Kia divers directly. Do not hesitate. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. And I like saying this, and I say this often. It doesn't matter how much time you spend trying to reinvent the wheel. It's always going to end up round. That's the most efficient. It's the most efficient. Don't try to go other places, or even think you can even go other places, or start a new tour company. Go to Kia divers. Reach out to Giannis. You can find them on the internet. You can reach out to me. I'll give you their contact information. That's who you want to be with on the Britannic. They have the most amount of experience, and they're there to keep you safe. We were kept safe because of them.
Henry, thanks so much for talking us through all of that. I think what really comes across is that diving Britannic is not simply about being capable of reaching the wreck. I think it's the months of planning, the right team, the detailed emergency preparation, and the huge amount of trust from everyone involved. I consider myself exceptionally fortunate to have been part of it, but now I have an even greater appreciation of just how much work went on behind the scenes to make those dives possible. So our dives may have lasted several hours, with actually only 20 to 30 minutes on the bottom. But in order to do that, in order to make that happen, what was needed was the years of experience and the months of work. Thanks again. Thanks to everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm Dom Robinson, deep wreck diver. I've got loads of other Britannic videos. Feel free to go and have another look at one of them. Otherwise, I'll see you on my next video.